Imagine the three supreme creators of the universe just showing up at your front door, specifically to destroy your life.
Right, the ultimate cosmic threat.
Yeah. And now imagine that instead of fighting them, or, instead of launching into some epic mythological battle, you just accidentally turn them into helpless, crying infants.
Which is such a wild visual.
It really is. So, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are exploring a figure whose story just completely upends, everything you might assume about how power operates in ancient mythology. We are talking about Sati Anusuya.
And we really need to emphasize that we aren't just recounting a few fairy tales today.
Definitely not.
If you look closely at the primary texts, and we have a pretty formidable stack of them in front of us today, her narrative is actually this profound study of an architect.
Oh, absolutely. We've got, let's see, the Valmiki Ramayana, the Bhagavata Purana, the Skanda Markandeya Bhavisha, and Shiva Puranas.
Right, a massive amount of source material, plus some esoteric texts from Sahaja Yoga and, various regional folklore.
Yeah, and through all of this, for you listening, what we are really exploring is the exact mechanics of how absolute, uncorrupted virtue can generate this literal physical force. A force capable of bending the laws of nature.
And overriding the will of the gods themselves, which is a huge deal.
It's massive because, you hear the word virtue today and it sounds so passive.
It sounds like just sitting quietly and following the rules.
Exactly. It sounds boring. But the sources we're pulling from, they absolutely do not treat her virtue as a passive trait. They treat it as like a weapon of mass preservation.
That's a great way to put it.
Sati Anusuya is arguably the most powerful human being in the entire Hindu mythological canon, and she achieves that status without ever picking up a weapon or casting an offensive spell.
Because she operates on just a completely different frequency than the rest of the mythological landscape.
Right.
To really understand how she could effortlessly turn the Trimurti, the three supreme gods, into toddlers, we have to start at the foundational level.
The DNA of her character.
Yes, her lineage and the precise etymology of her name. Because in Sanskrit literature, a name is never just a label.
Oh.
It's a programmatic definition of the soul.
Okay, so let's break down Anasuya. We've got the prefix ana, which means without.
Right.
And then Asuya, which translates to jealousy, envy, or malice. So she is the one entirely devoid of envy.
Which sounds nice on the surface, right?
Yeah, free from jealousy sounds like a lovely, peaceful disposition to have.
But in the context of the Puranas, this isn't just a nice personality quirk. It is an impenetrable shield.
Okay, wait, let's unpack that. Why is this specific absence of envy so critical here? What makes it a shield?
Well, look at the engine driving almost every major conflict in Vedic and Puranic literature. What causes all the drama?
It's usually some god getting mad at someone else, right?
Exactly. It's almost always ego and envy. You have Indra, the king of the gods, and he gets intensely jealous whenever a mortal sage accumulates too much spiritual power.
Oh, yeah. He's always sending celestial nymphs to break their meditation.
Right. And then you have Daksha's jealousy and hatred of Shiva, which leads to the destruction of his massive sacrifice.
It's just endless drama.
It really is. Demons are envious of the gods' immortality. Sages are envious of each other's status. The entire cosmological ecosystem is basically a churning ocean of ego-driven one-upmanship.
So the gods and demons are basically playing this eternal high-stakes game of cosmic politics.
Precisely. And they know exactly how to manipulate anyone who plays that game.
Because everyone has a weak spot.
Yes. If you have even a sliver of ambition or pride or envy, a deity or an asura can find that crack and exploit it. They can trigger you. They can curse you.
Ah, I see where this is going.
Right. So Anusuya, by being fundamentally devoid of asura, she possesses no cracks.
She is stepping entirely outside the game.
Exactly. She is untriggerable. Because she desires nothing that belongs to another, the usual mechanisms of divine manipulation simply slide right off her.
It's such a fascinating paradox. By desiring no power over others, she inadvertently accumulates absolute power over herself, which makes her untouchable.
Untouchable and incredibly grounded.
Yeah, and she comes from a lineage that deeply, deeply understands the mechanics of consciousness. We're talking about elite spiritual royalty here.
Very elite.
Her parents are the Prajapati, Kardama, and Devahuti. Her grandfather is Swayambhuva Manu, literally the progenitor of humanity in this cycle of creation.
It's a heavy-hitting family tree.
But the most interesting connection to me, personally, is her brother, the great sage Kapila.
Oh, Kapila is a massive figure. He is traditionally credited as the founder of the Sankhya school of Hindu philosophy.
Right, and Samkhya is entirely about the dualism between Purusha, which is pure, unmanifest consciousness,
Yes, the observer.
and Prakriti, which is the material realm of nature and matter.
The observed.
Exactly. So if her own brother, who also acted as her guru, by the way, is the architect of the philosophy that systematically categorizes reality into consciousness and matter, Anusuya isn't just blindly following rituals.
Not at all.
She has a master-level understanding of how the universe is actually constructed. She knows the source code.
She understands that material reality is malleable if your consciousness is sufficiently anchored.
Wow, yes.
And she marries Sage Atri, who is a mind-born son of the creator Brahma and one of the Saptarishis.
The 7 great sages who guide the cosmos.
Right. But it's really crucial to establish here that her power isn't just a byproduct of her husband's status.
No, she's not just a powerful man's wife.
Exactly. Her power is independently generated through a practice called pativratya.
Okay, we need to spend some time right here, because this is where modern translations can create massive, just huge misunderstandings for people.
Oh, without a doubt.
Because if you translate Pativrati directly into English, you generally get wifely devotion or chastity.
Which is a very loaded translation.
Right. And for you, listening today in the 21st century, those words carry an immense amount of cultural baggage. It sounds inherently patriarchal.
It sounds like submission.
Yes. It sounds like her entire spiritual identity is subjugated to serving a man. But the sources, they describe her Pativrata as the source of a reality-bending energy called Tapa Shakti.
Which is a very different concept than just being a dutiful wife.
Exactly. So how do we reconcile this modern perception of, dutiful wife with the ancient reality of a world-altering superhuman?
Well, it requires a complete paradigm shift. We have to separate our contemporary sociological critiques of gender roles from the ancient metaphysical framework of dharma.
Okay, darn.
In the Puranic worldview, dharma, which is often translated as duty, but is actually much more accurately described as the fundamental ordering principle of the cosmos.
So it's not just polite societal rules,
No, it is not a socially constructed set of rules. It is the physics of reality.
like gravity or thermodynamics.
Exactly. Every entity in the universe has a specific dharma. Fire's dharma is to burn. The sun's dharma is to shine.
Okay, that makes sense.
And a human's dharma depends on their stage of life and their societal role. So the philosophical premise here is that when any being aligns themselves absolutely flawlessly with their designated dharma, they create a kind of spiritual friction.
Oh, spiritual friction. I like that.
Right, because they are actively denying the chaotic, selfish impulses of the ego, and they are channeling all their willpower into a singular, laser-focused adherence to cosmic order.
And that friction generates heat.
Literally. That is what tapas means. It translates to deep spiritual heat or incandescence.
Yeah.
It is an intensely active, fiercely disciplined state of being. So Pativratya, in this specific ancient context, was viewed as a highly spiralized, rigorous yogic discipline for women.
So it's not about the husband, it's about the discipline.
Precisely. It required an iron will, a complete mastery over the senses, and an unwavering commitment to a vow. By executing her dharma perfectly, Anusuya isn't passively submitting to Atri, she's actively accumulating a massive reservoir of thermodynamic spiritual energy.
She builds up a cosmic bank account.
A cosmic bank account of tapas that is so dense it exerts a gravitational pull on the universe itself.
That is such a powerful framing. She isn't a victim of her circumstances. She is a master of her chosen discipline. The vow is just the crucible, right? The power comes from her unwavering adherence to it.
Exactly.
And to illustrate just how potent this Pativrata energy is, we can look at a story from the Markandeya Purana, where Anusuya actually has to intervene to stop a universal collapse.
Yes.
A collapse caused by the fallout of another woman's devotion.
Ah, the story of the frozen sun and the leper.
Yes.
It is hands down one of the most bizarre and extreme thought experiments in all of Puranic literature.
It really pushes the boundaries of the concept to the absolute breaking point. So, okay, let's set the scene. We have a Brahmin named Kaushika.
Right.
And Kaushika is, by all accounts, just a terrible husband. He abandons his dharma entirely.
Completely ignores it.
Yeah. Despite having this fiercely devoted wife, who is named Chandeli, or sometimes Shilavati or Sumati, depending on the recension you read, Kaushika decides he wants to spend all his time with a local prostitute.
He embraces complete moral degradation.
Cold degradation.
Mm.
And as a physical manifestation of that degradation, he contracts leprosy.
Which, in these texts, is often symbolic of deep karmic decay.
Exactly. So eventually his wealth dries up, and the prostitute just throws him out into the street.
He has nothing left.
Nothing. Sick, broke, and physically deteriorating, Kaushika returns to his wife, and his wife takes him back.
Which is already a tremendous display of adherence to her vow, regardless of his unworthiness.
Right, but the text pushes it even further. It gets so extreme. Kaushika, in his delirious and selfish state, tells his wife he still longs for the prostitute.
He has learned nothing.
Nothing. He actually begs his wife to take him back to the brothel.
And here's where the story truly tests the modern reader.
Oh yeah, because the wife, operating under this absolute extreme interpretation of fulfilling her husband's desires, she actually puts him in a woven basket.
Because he can't walk.
Right. So she physically carries him on her back in the dead of night through a dark forest, specifically to deliver him to the prostitute's house.
I really want to pause here because I know you listening to this are anticipating a modern reaction. It sounds horrific.
It sounds like the ultimate toxic relationship.
It absolutely does. But we have to remember the ancient authors are conducting a philosophical stress test on the concept of dharma.
Well, a stress test.
Yes, they are asking a very specific question. What happens when the object of devotion is entirely unworthy? Does the mechanism of pativratya still function?
And the text says yes.
Right. The narrative insists that the spiritual power is generated entirely by the woman's internal discipline, not by the man's merit. The husband is merely the focal point for her yoga.
Wow. Okay, so she's navigating this dark forest, carrying her leper husband in a basket on her back. And in the pitch black, Kaushika accidentally bumps into something.
Or rather, someone.
Right. He bumps into Sage Mandavya. Now, Mandavya is currently impaled on the wooden spike.
As one does in a Puranic forest.
Just a normal Tuesday. He was wrongfully accused of a crime by local king and sentenced to impalement. But because Mandavya is an immensely powerful yogi himself, he hasn't died.
He's beyond normal physical limitations.
Right. He's simply surviving on the spike, deep in meditation, keeping himself alive through sheer tapas.
You really have to appreciate the wild, surreal imagery of these forests. You have a woman carrying her leper husband to a brothel, and they bump into an immortal sage surviving on an executioner spike in the dark.
It's vivid, to say the least. It's cinematic.
Yeah.
But Mandavya, who is understandably in agonizing pain, has his meditation broken by this jostling.
He is furious.
Naturally. He identifies Kaushika as the culprit, and he unleashes a fatal curse. Mandavya decrees, "You will die the moment the sun rises tomorrow."
And a sage's curse is not just an empty threat.
It's a literal death sentence.
It is a modification of reality. Mandavya has enough tapas to enforce that sentence. Kaushika is essentially already dead. He's just waiting for the timer to run out at dawn.
But Shandili hears this curse, and she completely refuses to let her husband die. So, drawing upon the immense, accumulated tapas from her own radical devotion, she looks to the eastern horizon and issues a counter-command to the cosmos.
This is the turning point.
She speaks directly to Surya, the sun deity, and says, "Do not rise tomorrow."
And this is where the cosmic physics completely break down, because the sun obeys her.
Because her spiritual gravity is stronger than the celestial mechanics.
Yes, her tapas outweighs the natural order,
Yeah.
and the implications of that are apocalyptic.
Because we think of a long night as just an inconvenience, like, oh, I'll sleep in.
Right, but in the Vedic cosmological framework, the entire universe functions on yajna.
The cycle of sacrifice and offering.
Exactly, which is entirely dictated by the movement of the sun. Without the sunrise, the morning oblations cannot be poured into the sacred fires.
And without those oblations, the gods do not receive their nourishment.
The deities literally begin to starve.
Wow.
Furthermore, without the sun's heat, there is no evaporation. Without evaporation, there are no rain clouds. Without rain, the crops die, and humanity starves.
It's a domino effect.
A catastrophic one. Time itself, which is measured by the solar transit, grinds to a halt. The universe is thrown into absolute thermodynamic and temporal gridlock.
And all because the willpower of one disciplined woman is holding the sun below the horizon to indefinitely postpone a curse.
It is the ultimate standoff.
So the deities are panicking. The cosmic machinery is failing. So the gods rush to Brahma, the creator, and they plead with him to restart the sun.
Do something, Brahma.
Right. Fix this. But Brahma looks at the situation and realizes he is powerless.
Which is a huge admission for the creator god.
He tells the gods that the spiritual heat generated by Shandili's pativratya is superior to his own divine authority.
A god cannot simply forcefully override the power of a mortal's absolute virtue.
Because it would shatter the underlying logic of the universe.
It's a fascinating limitation on divine omnipotence. The rules of Dharma bind everyone, even Brahma. He recognizes that only a comparable force can neutralize the situation.
He needs someone who wields the same kind of energy, but with a broader perspective.
So he sends the gods to Anusuya.
He realizes that only a woman of equal or greater virtue can actually reason with Kaushika's wife. And I find Anusuya's intervention here so profound.
It really highlights her nature.
Because she doesn't fly in on a chariot and blast Chandili with divine energy. She doesn't force the sun up. She acts as a cosmic mediator.
She employs empathy rather than authority.
Exactly. Anusuya travels to the forest and she just sits down with Chandili. And she doesn't condemn Chandili's actions.
She doesn't say, "What are you doing with this terrible man?"
No. She deeply validates her devotion. She essentially says, I recognize your power. I honor your vow. But then she elevates the perspective.
She initiates a dialogue about universal balance.
Yes. She explains the concept of lokasangraha, the maintenance of the world. By saving the life of this one man, Chandili is actively causing the death of all flora, fauna, humanity, and divinity.
She appeals to Chandili's wisdom. She argues that dharma cannot be used to cannibalize all other dharmas.
But Chandili is still faced with the reality of the curse, right? If she lets the sun rise, her husband dies, and she fails her specific vow.
Which is why Anusuya has to utilize her own cosmic bank account.
She makes a guarantee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because her own tapa shakti is so unfathomably deep. I mean, even deeper than Chandili's, Anusuya promises that if Chandili releases the sun, Anusuya herself will intercept the sage's curse.
And furthermore, she promises to cure Kaushika's leprosy entirely, restoring his youth and health.
She underwrites the risk using her own spiritual capital.
Which is an incredible flex. Chandili recognizes the absolute purity of Anusuya's word. She trusts her. So Chandili withdraws her command, the sun breaks over the horizon, the morning rituals resume, and the universe breathes a collective sigh of relief.
The machinery starts turning again.
And true to her word, Anusuya instantly resurrects Kaushika and purifies his diseased body.
It is an incredible display of soft power resolving an existential hard problem.
She saves the universe not through violence, but through negotiation and the deployment of pure spiritual merit.
And the gods are ecstatic. I mean, they were starving.
They are so relieved that they offer Anusuya a massive boon, any wish she desires.
A blank check from the universe.
And her request is staggering. She asks that the Trimurtis, so Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer, be born to her as her own sons.
It's a breathtakingly bold request, to ask the uncreated architects of reality to incarnate as your children.
In the Markandeya Purana, this boon is granted smoothly as a joyous reward for her cosmic mediation.
Everyone's happy.
Right, but the Purana corpus is vast, and different texts emphasize very different aspects of her power. If you look at regional legends and variations found in texts like the Bhagavata Purana and the Skanda Purana, you get a radically different, much more scandalous version of how the Trimurti became her children.
A much darker origin story.
A story sparked not by gratitude, but by divine insecurity.
This brings us to Anusuya's ultimate test. The transition from Anusuya the negotiator to Anusuya the neutralizer.
Okay, let's introduce the catalyst for this drama, Sage Narada.
Ah, Narada.
If you read Hindu mythology, you know Narada. He is a divine wandering sage, constantly traveling between the mortal and celestial realms playing his lute. And his primary narrative function is almost always instigating conflict.
He is the ultimate cosmic gossip.
He really is. But he doesn't instigate malice just for the sake of evil, does he?
No, not at all. He stirs the pot to force spiritual evolution. He exposes hidden ego so that it can be destroyed.
Well, he definitely exposes some ego here. Narada pays a visit to the celestial realms to see the Tridevi.
The three supreme goddesses.
Yes. Saraswati, consort of Brahma, Lakshmi, consort of Vishnu, and Parvati, consort of Shiva. They are the absolute embodiments of divine power, wealth, and energy.
The queens of the universe.
And Narada very casually drops a bomb. He tells them that Sati Anusuya, a mere mortal woman living in a forest down on earth, is actually the most virtuous woman in all of existence.
He hits them right in the pride.
Right where it hurts. And he uses a very specific, weirdly domestic metaphor to prove his point. He tells the goddesses that Anusuya's internal spiritual fire, her tapas, is so intense that she could easily cook a meal of beans made out of solid iron.
The symbolism of iron is very important here. Iron represents unyielding, cold, dense matter, The implication is that her spiritual heat is so profound it can alter the fundamental properties of the most stubborn material.
So the goddesses, feeling challenged, attempt to bake iron beings themselves.
Naturally.
And they fail. The iron remains iron.
The divine fire isn't hot enough.
And this failure, combined with Narada's relentless praise of a mortal, just entirely consumes the Tridevi with jealousy.
Which is highly ironic.
Right. Remember, Anusuya means without envy, making her the perfect foil to the goddesses in this moment, who are entirely captured by it.
They fall right into the trap.
Driven by this insecurity, the goddesses approach their husbands, the Trimurti, and they demand that Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva go down to earth and test this woman.
They want her humiliated.
They want her myth of unshakable virtue shattered. They cannot stand that she's perceived as better than them.
And the Trimurti, interestingly, are unable or unwilling to dissuade their wives.
They just go along with it.
They agree to the plot. They descend to the Dandaka forest, to the hermitage of Atri and Anusuya.
And they time it perfectly. Sage Atri is away at the river performing his daily ablutions. Anusuya is home alone.
She is isolated.
And the three supreme gods disguise themselves as mendicants, wandering, hungry ascetics begging for alms.
Which leverages one of the most unbreakable rules of ancient Indian society, Atithi Devo Bhava.
The guest is equivalent to God.
Exactly.
If an ascetic comes to your door asking for food, refusing them is a massive violation of Dharma. It accrues terrible negative karma.
It's an obligation you cannot ignore.
So Anusuya, honoring her duty, welcomes the three strangers. She washes their feet, she prepares a meal, and she invites them to eat.
She does everything perfectly right.
But right as she is about to serve the food, they spring the trap.
They lay down an impossible condition.
They look at her and tell her, "We are bound by a strict vow. We will only accept and eat this food if you serve it to us entirely naked."
It is a brilliantly cruel, localized paradox.
That's awful.
It is designed specifically to destroy her ontological status.
I've heard it compared to an ethical trolley problem, but honestly, it's much worse than that.
Because in a trolley problem, you are choosing between two external tragedies.
Right. Here, both choices result in the complete annihilation of her own spiritual identity.
She loses no matter what she does.
If she refuses to serve them because of their inappropriate demand, she violates the sacred law of hospitality. She insults wandering ascetics, breaking her dharma and losing her merit.
A huge failure.
But if she complies and disrobes in front of three strange men, she shatters her vow of modesty and patavratya. Her virtue is destroyed either way.
The goddesses designed a test with no correct answer.
It is a checkmate scenario. A mortal mind would just panic or argue or despair.
You'd yell at them to leave.
But she doesn't. She doesn't scream at them. She doesn't try to lecture them on their inappropriate behavior. She doesn't throw them out.
She remains perfectly calm.
She simply closes her eyes, meditates on her husband, and transforms the very nature of the scenario.
She accesses her tejbal. In the esoteric texts of Sahaja Yoga, this is described as a profoundly divine, radiant maternal energy.
Maternal energy.
Yes. And in many Puranic versions, she utilizes the Pada Tirtham.
Which is what?
This is the water she had used to wash her husband's feet earlier. In the metaphysical mechanics of the time, this water holds the concentrated, physicalized energy of her devotion. It is highly charged, tapas.
Okay, so she takes this water in her hand, mutters a mantra, and sprinkles it over the three disguised gods.
And the illusion shatters.
But more than that, their physical forms completely regress. The three supreme, omnipotent beings of the universe are instantly transformed into tiny, helpless, crying infants.
It is an absolute masterstroke of logic.
It's genius. By turning them into babies, she completely bypasses the paradox.
How so?
Because according to the strict laws of dharma and modesty, the concept of sexual shame or immodesty does not exist between a mother and her newborn infant. A mother can be entirely naked before her babies without breaking any vow of chastity or virtue.
Ah, so she altered the variables of the equation so that the solution became mathematically possible.
Precisely. By rendering them into infants, she can safely disrobe, serve them the food, and in many traditions, she literally breastfeeds the three gods.
Fulfilling the vow of hospitality flawlessly?
Yes, while keeping her patavratya completely unblemished.
She used the ultimate loophole.
But it's a loophole built entirely on pure innocence. I think that's the most beautiful part of this myth. She didn't use her power to violently attack the gods who were trying to humiliate her.
She didn't strike them down.
She didn't curse them to suffer. She used her power to make them innocent.
It demonstrates that true virtue doesn't need to perform outrage.
That is so true.
She didn't debate the mendicants. She simply neutralized their masculine, aggressive ego through the application of absolute maternal innocence. She brought them down to a state of purity where their malicious intent could no longer even exist.
It is an incredibly graceful victory. However, I have to bring up the alternative version from the Bhavishya Purana.
Oh, we must.
Because while the mainstream narrative is all about this clever maternal grace, the Bhavishya Purana takes the exact same premise and turns it into something just terrifying.
Yes, it's vital to acknowledge that these texts are not a monolith. Different sects and eras interpreted the nature of female spiritual power, or Shakti, in very different ways.
Right. So in the Bhavishya Purana variant, the gods don't bother with the subtle disguise. They arrive at her hermitage in their true, terrifyingly magnificent forms.
Riding their divine mounts. The swan, the eagle, the bull.
And they don't ask for a meal. The text portrays them as being overcome by a sudden, almost maddening lust.
Which is in itself framed as a catastrophic lapse in their divinity, caused by the goddess's jealousy.
They aggressively attempt to seduce Anusuya. They threaten her. They demand she satisfy them, or they will end their own lives.
Which, if the creators of the universe end their lives, would collapse the universe entirely.
Talk about toxic pressure. It is a profound, violent violation of cosmic order by the very beings tasked with maintaining that order.
It's the ultimate corruption.
And in this version, Anusuya is not the gentle mother. She is terrified, but that terror ignites her Parvati into a blazing, wrathful fire.
She doesn't sprinkle water.
No, she screams a curse at them. And because her internal truth is absolute, her spoken word becomes instant reality. The three supreme gods are violently, forcibly merged together into a bizarre, horrifying, mutant amalgamation.
It is a shocking image.
The text describes a singular creature possessing Shiva's linga, Brahma's head, and Vishnu's feet. They are trapped in this grotesque form until they experience true repentance.
Why does this grotesque imagery exist in the text? What does it symbolize?
What's your take on it?
It represents the distortion of divine intent. When the gods abandon their high cosmic functions and succumb to base, animalistic lust, their forms are degraded to match their intent.
So they become what they're acting like.
Exactly. The Bhavishya Purana is highlighting a different facet of Shakti. While the baby story shows a woman's power to nurture and neutralize, the curse story shows that if you push absolute purity too far, if you try to violate it, it doesn't just outsmart you.
It crushes you.
It crushes you and distorts your very nature. It is a stark warning about the destructive capacity of female spiritual energy when provoked.
It's the difference between disarming a bomb and throwing it back.
Yeah.
So regardless of which version you follow, whether she gracefully dissolved them into infants with holy water or cursed them into a mutant amalgamation until they repented and then became babies to be released from the curse.
The end result is the same.
Right. Anusuya now has the three most powerful entities in the cosmos sleeping in a wooden cradle in her living room.
Just taking a nap.
Which brings us to the aftermath.
The universe is suddenly without its management.
Days turn into weeks. The cosmic functions of creation, preservation, and destruction are stalling because the architects are busy taking naps and drinking milk in a forest hermitage.
Someone has to run the universe.
And they aren't. So the Tridevi, Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Parvati, who engineered this entire disaster out of petty jealousy, they begin to panic.
Their husbands are missing.
And they realize, to their absolute horror, that the Trimurti have been outmatched and trapped by the very mortal woman they sought to destroy.
The irony is incredibly thick here.
So the three supreme goddesses of the universe have to do the ultimate walk of shame.
Oh, it's so embarrassing for them.
They leave the celestial realms, travel down to the Dandaka forest, and approach the humble ashram of Atri and Anusuya. They had to stand before this mortal woman and beg for forgiveness.
And observe Anusuya's reaction here. It's key. She has every right to be furious.
She really does.
These goddesses orchestrated a plot to destroy her spiritual life, her marriage, and her societal standing.
They tried to ruin her.
But Anusuya displays zero gloating, zero vindictiveness.
Remember her name, Anusuya, free from malice.
She gracefully accepts their apology. She agrees to return their husbands. But she issues one small, quiet challenge.
Oh, I love this part.
She says, I will restore them. You simply have to look into the cradle and identify which baby is yours.
It is the quietest, most devastating power move in all of mythology. The goddesses walk over to the cradle, And they just freeze.
They have no idea.
Because the three babies look completely, utterly identical. They're just three radiant little human infants.
Think about the theological implication of this moment.
It's huge.
The goddesses are supposed to be the omniscient consorts of the divine, but they are entirely dependent on iconography.
They need the visual cues.
Yes. They are looking for Brahma's four heads, or Vishnu's blue skin and discus, or Shiva's ash-covered body and trident. Anusuya stripped the gods of their external trappings, their divine egos, their weapons, and their symbols.
She reduced them to their pure, unmanifest essence.
And it proves that at their core, stripped of the cosmic roles they play, the gods are all the exact same singular, unified consciousness.
It humiliates the goddesses further, but it does so by teaching them a profound metaphysical lesson.
Right. Their jealousy over whose husband was more powerful was utterly pointless because fundamentally they are all the same energy.
The goddesses are forced to confront their own limitations. They learn more from this quiet, identical cradle than they would have from 1,000 furious lectures.
Absolutely.
So having made her point, Anusuya relents and restores Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva to their true adult divine forms.
And the gods are not angry.
Not at all. They are deeply moved. They are thoroughly impressed by her unshakable virtue, her brilliant intellect, and her maternal grace.
They want to reward her.
And so, fulfilling the boon from the earlier story of the frozen sun, they agree to be born as her children.
The manifestation of this boon varies slightly depending on the text, but generally they are born as three separate, incredibly powerful sons.
Tell us about them.
From Brahma's essence comes Soma, or Chandra, the moon god. From Shiva's essence comes sage Durvasa, who is famous throughout mythology for his dangerously irascible temper and immense power.
He curses everyone.
He really does. And from Vishnu's essence comes Dattatreya.
Okay, we need to focus heavily on Dattatreya because his legacy is massive, particularly in Western India and Maharashtra.
It's a huge tradition.
In many traditions, Dattatreya isn't just an avatar of Vishnu. He is depicted as a single, unified being possessing 3 heads and 6 arms.
He is the literal embodiment of the Trimurti in one form. He holds the trident and drum of Shiva, the discus and conch of Vishnu, and the water pot and rosary of Brahma.
So all the symbols are merged.
Yes. And he is usually accompanied by 4 dogs representing the 4 Vedas and a cow representing Mother Earth.
He is the ultimate deity of synthesis.
Exactly. Dattatreya represents the absolute unification of the evolutionary force, the existential preservation force, and the creative force.
The whole package.
For a yogi or an ascetic seeking ultimate truth, Dattatreya is the perfect focal point because he resolves all sectarian divisions.
There's no more arguing over who is the best god.
Right. He holds multiple, seemingly contradictory cosmic truths at once, and Anusuya is the mother of this unified cosmic consciousness. She didn't just birth a god, she birthed the concept of divine unification.
So she's mastered the gods, she's unified their power, she's commanded the sun. But her tapas, that internal spiritual heat we talked about earlier, it doesn't just manipulate consciousness and time.
It has a profound effect on physical matter and geography, too.
Which became desperately necessary when the very biosphere she lived in began to collapse.
The ancient texts, specifically episodes detailed in the Valmiki Ramayana and the Shiva Purana, describe a catastrophic ecological disaster in the Chitrakoot forest.
Which is the region where Atri and Anusuya maintain their hermitage.
Yes, it becomes ground zero for a massive, prolonged famine.
The sources vary on the exact duration. Some say there was no rain for 10 years, some say 54 years.
And some of the more hyperbolic Puranic texts claim a drought of 100 years.
But the specific number doesn't really matter. The point is that the earth is completely dying. The rivers have dried to dust, the vegetation is gone, the animals are perishing in the heat. Even the birds have abandoned the sky because there is no water to be found anywhere.
It is a total wasteland. And during this apocalyptic drought, Sage Atri is deep in a prolonged period of penance.
He's meditating.
He has completely withdrawn his consciousness from the external world. He is sitting in the lotus position, eyes closed, meditating on the absolute, completely unaffected by the physical suffering around him.
But his disciples aren't so detached.
No, they are human.
The male ascetics who live in the ashram, who are supposed to be studying the scriptures and mastering their bodies, they simply cannot handle the sheer physical agony of starvation and dehydration. One by one, they abandon the forest, they flee to other kingdoms to find food and water.
This creates a fascinating contrast between different modes of asceticism. The male students abandon the dying world to save themselves. The male guru withdraws his mind from the dying world to seek transcendence.
But Anusuya, the female ascetic, stays.
She remains firmly rooted in the physical world. She stays by her husband's side to protect his physical body while he meditates. She represents the ultimate enduring nurturer.
But she doesn't just passively sit there and watch the animals die.
No, she takes action.
She decides to actively intervene and solve the ecological crisis. She takes Earth and shapes it into a Shivalinga, the abstract representation of the divine. And she begins to perform her own intense austerities.
But her goal isn't personal enlightenment.
Right. Her goal is to forcefully bring water back to the dead land.
She initiates a direct line of communication with the celestial rivers. Depending on the text, she invokes either the goddess Ganga or the local river goddess Mandakini.
She demands that the river descend from the heavens to the dry earth of Chitrakoot.
And the texts give us a very specific, almost transactional detail here that I find so revealing about how spiritual mechanics were viewed at the time.
Oh, the digging of the pit.
Yes. Anusuya literally digs a pit in the dry, cracked earth. The river goddess appears before her, acknowledging Anusuya's immense purity. But to get a celestial river to permanently alter its course and flow through a dead ecosystem, there is a cosmic price to pay.
The goddess agrees to flow, but on one condition. Anusuya must transfer 1 year's worth of her own accumulated spiritual merit, her hard-earned tapa shakti, directly to the river goddess.
It treats spiritual merit exactly like a fungible cosmic currency.
Which is wild. It's not just a measure of how good you are. It's a battery of energy that you can bank, and more importantly, that you can spend.
You can spend it to buy miracles.
Anusuya has banked decades of flawless adherence to Dharma. She is spiritually wealthy beyond measure. So when the river goddess demands a year's worth of merit, Anusuya pays the invoice without hesitation.
It perfectly frames her social and ecological function. She doesn't hoard her spiritual capital to guarantee her own passage to a higher heaven.
She liquidates her assets to restore the biosphere.
Exactly. The moment she transfers that merit, the Mandakini River bursts forth from the pit she dug.
The water floods the dry riverbeds. The lush greenery instantly returns. The animals flock to the water, the birds return to the trees, and the starving sages who had fled come rushing back the oasis she created.
She single-handedly terraforms a dead zone back into a paradise.
And the Mandakini River still flows through Chitrakoot to this very day. It is a tangible geographical feature that local tradition attributes entirely to the willpower of one woman.
Her fame as a master of the elements and as the ultimate authority on duty and survival, it just spread across eras.
Her reputation was legendary.
It echoed through time until it drew the attention of the most famous royal couple in Hindu mythology during the most precarious moment of their lives.
Which brings us to her pivotal role in the great epic, the Ramayana.
A beautiful intersection of mythological timelines.
It really is. In the Ramayana, Lord Rama, who is an avatar of Vishnu, his wife Sita, who is an incarnation of the goddess Lakshmi, and his brother Lakshmana, are exiled from their royal palace in Ayodhya.
They are sentenced to wander the Dandaka forest for 14 years.
They are transitioning from a life of ultimate luxury and safety into a wilderness teeming with demonic forces and harsh elements.
It's a brutal reality check.
And during their wandering, they seek refuge at the ashram of Atri and Anusuya.
Rama holds Anusuya in the highest reverence.
He does. When they arrive, Sage Atri, who is clearly incredibly proud of his wife, starts recounting her miracles to Rama. He tells him about the Mandakini River. He also mentions, almost casually, the time Anusuya turned 10 days into 10 nights to help the gods.
Which is another mind-bending feat of time dilation. She essentially increased the spiritual gravity around the earth to stall its rotation for a week and a half.
Exactly. But while the men, so Rama, Lakshmana, and Atri, are sitting around the fire discussing these cosmic heavy-lifting feats, the true narrative weight of the scene shifts elsewhere.
To the women.
Sita, the exiled princess, seeks out Anusuya for private counsel. They sit together, away from the men.
And this interaction raises a deeply theological question.
Yes, because if you understand Sita to be the divine incarnation of the goddess Lakshmi, the mother of the universe, why does she need to sit at the feet of a mortal woman to receive advice?
What could Sati Anusuya possibly teach the goddess of fortune?
It's the perfect question. If Sita is divine, shouldn't she already know everything?
The answer lies in the specific narrative function of the Ramayana. In this epic, Vishnu and Lakshmi have incarnated to experience the genuine limitations, suffering, and strictures of the human condition.
They are playing by mortal rules.
Yes, Sita is playing the role of a human woman navigating a brutal, unforgiving human world, and she is about to face horrors.
She will be violently abducted by the demon king Ravana. She will be held captive in a terrifying foreign garden surrounded by demonic guards.
A cataclysmic war will be fought over her.
And eventually, she will face a heartbreaking trial by fire to prove her purity to a suspicious society.
She is about to walk through hell.
Yes, and Anusuya represents the absolute, tested pinnacle of human potential. She is the ultimate blueprint for how a human woman navigates a world filled with demonic threats, impossible societal pressures, and divine traps.
Anusuya imparts to Sita a doctrine known as the Stridharmara Hasha.
The secrets of women's dharma.
Precisely. And this isn't just a list of polite domestic chores.
Wash the dishes, fold the laundry.
Nothing like that. In this context, Anusuya is teaching Sita how to construct an unbreakable internal locus of control. She is telling Sita, when everything external is stripped away from you, when your kingdom is gone, when your physical safety is compromised, when even your husband is separated from you, your strict adherence to your own internal truth is your ultimate impenetrable armor.
She is psychologically preparing Sita to survive captivity without her mind breaking.
She is giving her the spiritual toolkit for survival.
But she also gives her tangible physical tools. Before Sita leaves the ashram, Anusuya blesses her with divine gifts. She gives Sita heavenly garments that will never tear or become soiled with dirt, celestial cosmetics that never fade, and a set of sublime, radiant jewelry.
These gifts are not mere royal accessories.
No, they serve a vital narrative function later in the epic.
They become crucial evidence.
When the demon Ravana kidnaps Sita and drags her into his flying chariot, violently carrying her across the sky toward the island of Lanka, Sita has the presence of mind to take off those glowing divine jewels Anusuya gave her.
She leaves a breadcrumb trail.
Yes, she bundles them up and drops them down to the earth, creating a glittering trail. Those specific jewels from the mortal ascetic become the breadcrumbs that lead Rama and the monkey army toward his kidnapped wife.
The interconnectedness of these ancient narratives is just staggering. Anusuya sits at the exact nexus of all these major cosmic events.
She saves the universe from a frozen sun. She busts the unified deity Dattatreya. She resurrects a dead biosphere. And she equips the central heroine of the Ramayana for her darkest trials.
He's the linchpin.
But as we move toward the present day, how is Anusuya viewed outside of these ancient formal epics? How does her legacy translate into more esoteric, mystical traditions or even modern pop culture?
Well, if you look at esoteric modern traditions, such as the teachings found in Sahaja Yoga, specifically texts like the Book of Adi Shakti, they elevate Anusuya beyond even her status as a supreme mortal.
They reclassify her completely.
They frame her as a direct, active incarnation of primordial cosmic energy.
They discuss the timeline of the Treta Yuga, which is the cosmic age during which the Ramayana takes place.
Right.
The text suggests that during this specific age, the Adi Shakti, the foundational feminine energy of the universe, incarnated simultaneously into three specific women to express three distinct aspects of divine power.
The text outlines this trinity very clearly.
Okay, tell us who they are.
Sita was the incarnation of Mahalakshmi, representing existence, preservation, and ascent. Mandodari, who was the remarkably noble and wise wife of the demon king Ravana, was the incarnation of Mahakali, representing the power of evolution and the ultimate destruction of evil.
And the third.
And Sati Anusuya was the incarnation of Saraswati.
So within this esoteric framework, what specifically does the Saraswati aspect represent?
Saraswati is the embodiment of pure, unadulterated innocence, ultimate creativity, and the power to completely neutralize aggression.
Neutralize aggression.
Yes. If you apply this lens back to the story of the Trimurti turning into babies, it completely reframes the myth. It's no longer just a clever trick to escape a trap.
It becomes a profound theological statement.
Exactly. Anusuya didn't fight the aggressive, lustful, ego-driven demands of the gods with counter-aggression. She deployed the ultimate weapon of Saraswati.
She neutralized the toxic masculine ego entirely by drowning it in absolute maternal innocence.
She disarmed hostility not by breaking the hostile entities, but by returning them to an uncorrupted state.
That is a stunning interpretation. It takes the folklore and reveals the deep psychological and spiritual mechanics underneath it. And the incredible thing is that her legacy isn't confined to dense esoteric books or ancient scrolls.
No, she is very much alive in the culture today.
It is a living, breathing part of the landscape of modern India. You listening right now can actually go and stand in the places where these myths are anchored.
Absolutely. The geography remembers her. The Sati Anusuya ashram is a very real, very vibrant pilgrimage site, still active today in Chitrakoot in the state of Madhya Pradesh.
You can go visit it.
It is located right on the banks of the Mandakini River, the exact river the texts say she pulled down from the heavens with her tapas. Thousands of people visit it to experience that profound, lingering peace. There is also the highly revered Anusuya Devi Temple, located high up in the Himalayas in Uttarakhand.
And we cannot ignore her impact on modern storytelling and pop culture. Her narrative is so inherently dramatic, so empowering, that it has continually resurfaced as blockbuster entertainment.
In movies?
Yes. The Telugu film industry produced massive, sweeping cinematic epics about her life. There was a huge hit movie in 1957 and another major release in 1971, both simply titled Sati Anusuya.
Proving that her story sells tickets.
It proves that this archetype, a woman who operates entirely on her own terms, who outsmarts the gods, who bends time and commands the elements through nothing but the sheer force of her own integrity, that archetype resonates deeply across every single generation.
It resonates because it addresses a fundamental human dilemma. If I may speak directly to you, the listener, navigating the complexities of the modern world, you might not be facing 3 disguised gods demanding you break your vows, or a cursing sage freezing the sun.
Probably not.
But you absolutely face impossible societal expectations. You face rigged ethical traps in your workplace or your community. You face toxic environments that demand you compromise your integrity to survive.
You face scenarios where every obvious choice feels like a loss.
Exactly. And Anusuya's story teaches us that true power doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't require swinging a bigger sword than your opponent. When faced with a rigged game, the deepest power lies in staying absolutely rooted in your own internal truth.
You don't have to play their game.
You don't always have to engage in a screaming match to refuse a demand, and you certainly don't have to break your own spirit to comply with it. Like Anusuya turning the gods into infants. Sometimes the most powerful, brilliant move is to completely transform the rules of the game until the trap simply dissolves.
You find that third path, the path that preserves your core identity while entirely neutralizing the threat. That is a masterclass in navigating power dynamics.
It really is.
So let's take a breath and look back at the sheer scale of the journey we've taken today. We started in a quiet forest hermitage with a woman defined by her absolute lack of envy.
We watch her become a cosmic negotiator, standing between a dying universe and a frozen sun, lecturing ancient deities on the mechanics of balance.
We saw her face a humiliating, impossible trap set by the insecure queens of heaven, only to outsmart them all and birth a unified three-headed god.
We saw her spend the massive wealth of her own spiritual bank account to terraform a desert and end a 100-year famine.
And we saw her sit quietly with a goddess in exile, passing down the psychological armor necessary to survive the darkest horrors of human existence.
She's the architect of miracles, but those miracles were built entirely on the quiet, unglamorous foundation of flawless discipline and unwavering intent.
And as we wrap up this deep dive into the extraordinary life of Sati Anusuya, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. We've explored all these texts, but there is a philosophical flip here that we haven't explicitly named yet.
It is a complete subversion of the fundamental premise of theology.
How so?
In almost every religious framework across the globe, the foundational direction of power is top-down. The divine shapes the mortal. Gods create humans. Gods test humans. Gods save humans.
That's the standard flow of power.
But Anusuya is the rare, astonishing figure who reverses the flow of that current. Through sheer willpower and absolute purity, she quite literally recreated the gods.
She broke them down and built them back up.
She reduced them to infants, she taught them a lesson in humility, and she birthed them anew as her own sons.
She became the mother of her own creators.
It makes you wonder if human virtue, when focused and pushed to its absolute maximum potential, can generate enough force to birth and command divinity itself, are the gods truly ruling us from above? Or are the gods simply mirrors reflecting the absolute awe-inspiring limits of our own human potential?
Is divinity something out there that we pray to, Or is it just the ceiling of what we can become when we master ourselves? That is a thought that is going to stay with me for a very long time. Thank you for joining us on this incredible exploration of Sati Anusuya. Keep exploring those ancient texts, keep questioning those impossible demands placed upon you, and stay curious. We'll see you next time on the Deep Dive.